is that in order to, I've created playlists so that if you're interested in any of my various things, sometimes like I have a 10-part series on the Jewish underground and the rise of modern Israel, which also is incredibly, incredibly relevant to issues that are up today, like Israel's right to the land, what the whole deal is with so-called Palestine, colonialism, decolonizing indigenous, all of that stuff. It's really a great series, but I don't know if you finish part 1, you got to find part 2, finish part 3, got to find part 4, and in between I've got my Navi classes and other stuff. So I created playlists. So if you just link to the playlist, you get all of it. It gives you all the different links. So I'll be sending that out too as soon as I finish up Navi. Okay, let's get started. Lots to do. We're in chapter 30. Chapter 30 is the next to last chapter of the book of 1 Samuel. And this is Saul, King Saul, Shaul HaMelech, already has been to that lady who brought up Samuel from the dead. Well, maybe he didn't. We talked about that. And he's been told that he's going to die tomorrow in battle against the Philistines with his sons. And now we go to chapter 30. 2 chapters left. And the text steps aside because there are 2 stories going on here. And the battle with the Philistines is going to be the next chapter, the last chapter in the book, chapter 31. In the meantime, it steps aside and goes into chapter 30. What happened to King David? Well, he's not king yet. What happened to David? David had fled the land of Israel, the country of Israel, because Saul's been trying to kill him. And he fled into the land of the Philistines in Gaza. Everything is relevant to everything. He's in the Gaza Strip, and the Philistines are making war now against Israel. Just like war with Gaza, more things change, the more they don't change. And so he's under the sponsorship of Achish, the king of the Philistines, just refreshing your memory, because we didn't meet last week. And he's brought his family, and he's got his 400 men, or 600 men now. He's got 600 men. He had started with 400, started with fewer. Sort of like that model that was created in the movie Seven Samurai, which became a model for later movies of how you build up your team one person at a time. And you get this guy, and then you get that guy, and each one joins one at a time. And that becomes a model in all these other movies. And so David actually is before the Seven Samurai. That's only the mid-1500s. David is gathering his men one at a time, and he's built up an army of 400. Now that's grown to 600 with women and children. And they have all, now if each one is a wife and 2-3 kids, household of 4 or 5, 600, that's 2,500 to 3,000 people. So David, who has the trust and faith of King Achish would like him to be living in the capital right near him, just refreshing your memory. And David doesn't want to be that close. He wants to convey to Achish that I'm loyal to you and I'm a traitor to the Jews in Israel, when in fact he's loyal to Israel and will be a traitor if possible to the Philistines. He doesn't want to live under Achish's thumb because he doesn't want Achish to see what he's up to. So he persuades Achish, there are 3,000 of us. It's a lot of people to live in your capital all of a sudden. We ought to live somewhere farther away. So Achish agrees and says, yeah, go ahead, live in Tziklag. And so he moves to Tziklag with his 3,000 people, his 600 men. And he's going out on regular sorties, attacking the local Amalekites, all the local non-Jewish, non-Israelite tribes, taking their possessions, killing them, so that there are no witnesses to go back to Achish and say, do you know what this guy, we're being attacked by all these invasions coming from your territory. Tziklag is part of your territory, and you're not controlling your own land. David doesn't want anybody telling Achish what he's up to. Achish has no idea because there's no modern communications, no ABC, CBS, BBC in order to go and report on the latest attacks. And so David's kind of running wild. And that's where that story is up to as we get into chapter 30. To refresh your memory, we learned some of it last week, 2 weeks ago, and then we're going to go right into a lot of commentary on both 28, 29, 30. We're going to go into a lot of commentary that really prepares us for chapter 31, perhaps God willing, next week. So here we go. Let's share the screen. As I said, let's share the screen. Let's make sure I've taken everything else down. Oops, let me just take that down. I'm trying to get rid of these annoying squares that have been up there. Okay, I lost screen sharing a moment. I'm going to try to get it back now. I'm going to optimize, and I'm going to screen share, and hopefully you're there. Okay, there we go. I want to take one more thing up. We've had those black squares, if you know what I'm referring to, and I've been working on certain theories to get all these annoying black squares off the screen, and I think I've got it pretty much figured out. And I think I can just got to take one more thing out of the way. Well, we'll do that later. We'll just have to. I'll leave that alone for now. And here we go. Well, I have to take that down. Screen sharing stuff. Okay, thank you for being patient. Here we go. This is part of my experiment so that we don't have all those little annoying black squares. May get the black bar once in a while, but no more black squares, hopefully. Here we go. First, I'd like to take out, I'd like to take out, and with this I'll start, 3 minutes prayer for the armed forces as they fight to defend this very homeland that we're so deeply devoted to and that we're learning about.
ארצנו וירא אלוקינו מגבול הלבנון מיד מדבר מצרים ומן הים הגדול עד לבוא הערבה היבשה באוויר ובים הוא יברך את חיילי צבא הגנה לישראל הוא יברך את חיילי צבא הגנה השם יטובנו הקמם עלינו ניגפים לפניהם הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמור ויציל את חיילינו מקר צרה וצוקה ומקר נגע המחלה וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם ידבה שונאינו תחתיהם ויתרם לחטא ישועה ועטרת ניצחון וקוים בהם הכתוב כי השם אלוקיכם ההולך עמכם להילחם לכם עם אויביכם להושיע אתכם ונאמר אמן ונאמר אמן ונאמר אמן ביבשה באוויר
Okay. I'll let that go. Okay, I'm going to learn now. So we left off at chapter 30. And chapter 30, as I said, is the King David part of the story. By the time David and his men arrived in Tziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had made a raid into the Negev and against Tziklag. So let's refresh our memory. Here's the land of the Philistines, what is today Hamas's Gaza Strip. It's really part of the land of Israel. Maybe it will be again someday, not too distant. From the river to the sea, all of Israel will be free. So if you recall, what we have here is that the king is based in Gath and David is in Tziklag. The king takes his army, his Philistine army, up towards the area of Mount Gilboa. And that's where Saul has the Israeli army, the Jewish army, the Israelite army. So so David's down here, and the thrust of the army is up there. So no one's got an eye on him. And he's involved with the Amalekites, and he's doing these sorties. He's raiding different areas, not only Amalekites, but other areas. And he's out on one raid for 3 days. And while he's out, Amalekites, whom he is not raiding this time, they come into Tziklag. And that's what's just happened here. So again, he's here. And so these tribes are coming in here and raiding while he's out, God knows where, some of these others. Okay. So refresh your memory. The Amalekites made a raid into the Negev and against Tziklag because the Amalekites are attacking Israel. And the Negev, you'll recall, is southern Israel, which was part of this shows them as part of the kingdom of Judea. But Israel, at the time of this particular map, as long in the future, had a civil war. This is all of Israel. And southern Israel is the Negev. So the Amalekites have raided southern Israel, and they're going into here also. They're already in the neighborhood. So they attack here. Okay. And they stormed Tziklag and burned it down. To refresh your memory, they take the women in captive. Everything, what do they say? I'm going to get the expression that the past is prologue to the future or whatever. Everything that happens with the Jews happens again. It's part of the Jewish, that's why we study this. We don't just study this for there's so many reasons we study Tanakh. For religious reasons to study Torah. It's God's holy work. We study God's work. Secondly, this is not dictated by God. The 5 books of the Torah are God dictates every word to Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it down, taking dictation from God. These books are not written by God, but by his great prophets. He inspired them with the words that he wrote, but he did not dictate. So the book of Samuel, Shmuel, is written greatly by the book of Shmuel, but this part is not written by him because he's already passed away. This is a holy book, so that's the reason we study it. We study it to learn our history. Our history, we don't deconstruct our history. Our history is exactly what our history is. And we don't change it for politics or to make people happy. And our history is what's going to happen in the future as well, and it's happening now. Jews suddenly being attacked and hostages being taken, a city burned down the way the Hamas burned down kibbutzim in the area of the deep Negev along the border of Gaza. This has happened. That's why when people say to me, Rabbi, is there ever going to be peace between Israel and the Palestinians? I tell them, first of all, there's no such thing as Palestinians. They're Arabs who live in Israel, in parts of Israel. There's no such thing as Palestine. But that aside, I tell them, do you want the sweet answer or the true answer? No, Rabbi, we want the truth. If we wanted the sweet answer, we'd ask someone else. We want the truth. If you want to know the truth, there's never going to be peace. No peace deal ever. There will never be peace between Israel and the Arabs. It's a permanent peace. There'll never be. What about the Abraham Accords? Okay, there's 23 Arab countries, and we have a half dozen. Very good. May it be more. Will there be permanent peace? No, not until Mashiach comes. And that's why we look forward to when Messiah comes. But there won't be permanent peace. It's an important part of learning to understand that when it comes to being Jewish, it's part of being Jewish. Part of being Jewish, when you're born as a Jew, you're born with a target on your back. You may not like it. And it may be all because you have a target doesn't mean that they're going to shoot. Sometimes there's a target and people walk by. You ever drive to a shopping mall and you notice a big target on one of the stores? Okay. I normally don't go into Target. So there's a target there, but we have a target on our backs. And you never know. So there are other people that are absolutely in shock. There are people that are just about one step from going into therapy, and many are in therapy, one step from going into going into institutions over what's going on in Harvard and Yale and Princeton, and not Princeton so much, but a little bit, but Harvard and Yale and Brown and Penn. You can't believe it. And me, I was just waiting for it. I mean, I was hoping it would not be in my generation. And I was even hoping it wouldn't be in my kids' generation. My kids finished college, so I was hoping it would not be in my, but I'm not surprised. Sooner or later, why should it not be now? It happened in Harvard in the 1930s, happened in Columbia in the 1930s. Nicholas Murray Butler, the university president of Columbia University, was a supporter of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. He had Nazis coming to Columbia on special programs. He had professors going to Nazi Germany. Why should it be different now? What? Because we're more enlightened? Human beings are human beings, not going to be more enlightened. Not when it comes to Jews. That's just what it is. Am I happy about it? No. Do I accept it? Totally. I accept a lot of things. I accept the Yankees are going to have a bad season again. It's the way it goes. Can't do anything about it. Okay, we continue. But it's important to understand as we learn this. That's why we learn it. Because what we're learning here gives us insights into what's coming up and what's happening now. So they took Vayishbu, they took Shevi, they took hostages, prisoners, the women and the children, just like Hamas. The same thing. Now it happens to be they did not kill them. They held them. What are they holding them for? For hostages. Surprise. When David and his men came to the town after 3 days of being out, they found their town burned down. Their wives and their children are gone. And David and the troops broke into tears. Okay, we were just through this on October 7th. And had no strength left for weeping. We went through that on October 7th. And among those taken, everybody. David was not immune. David, his two wives, Achinoam and Abigail. And what ended up happening is, this is like what Netanyahu, I told you last class 2 weeks ago. Overnight, Netanyahu went from 70% popularity. He now couldn't get elected dog catcher. He's the latest polls have him down from 70% to about 20% popularity. What happened? 12, 16 years, whatever, 12 years, he's been able to be prime minister. He's super popular. All of a sudden, he's lost his popularity. The current polls show that a guy named Benny Gantz would be elected new prime minister, and believe me, he's no better. It's just they want to change. And as soon as they elect him, they'll wish they had Netanyahu back, or because there's no one else on the horizon right now. Anyway, David's in danger. The troops, his 600 men who came and left Saul in Israel to fight with David, now they want to turn on him. What have you done for me lately? The troops threaten to stone him. For all the troops are bitter, it's your fault. You took us out onto this sortie and you left the home base undefended. Now our kids are missing. So David turned to God. That's where it's different from Netanyahu. Netanyahu turns to new politics, new political strategies. I'm not for him or against him right now. I'm for King David. I'm also for King Saul. I'm for these guys. I hope they win. I'm rooting, even as I'm learning, I'm trying. You ever watch a movie and you know how it's going to end, but you're hoping it ends differently? And in the end, no, it's going to end the way you knew it was going to end because you saw the movie 9 times already, but you love the movie. You just hate the way it has to end. And you just hope it'll be different this time. So I hope King Saul wins. I don't know what's going to happen. So David sought strength in God. David said to the Kohen, priest is a bad, when you think of a priest, you think of a modern day priest in a Catholic parish. I mean, fine, but that's not what Kohen is. Kohen gets married, not the Kohen Gadol. Well, yeah, the Kohen Gadol has to be married, in fact. In fact, it's an interesting thing about the Kohen Gadol that according to Jewish, the whole Talmudic discussion, the Torah says that on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol, the high Kohen, goes into the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, and performs the sacrificial rite at the time that the Beit HaMikdash stood. And it says he does 3 rituals. And the first part is he does it for himself and his household, from which the Talmud learns out he needs to have a household. He has to have a wife and kids, but at least a wife. And secondly, he does it for himself and the other members of the Kohen community. And then thirdly, he does it for himself and the people of Israel. But first of all, he has to have a wife. And they say, what if his wife dies right before Yom Kippur? And one of the rabbis in the Talmud says, therefore, there needs to be a backup wife online. They have to pick someone who agrees if his wife dies right before Yom Kippur, she comes in and he becomes his wife. And there's a whole debate in the Gemara where another rabbi says, where does it end? Then you need to have a backup wife in case that one dies too. So but the whole point is that the Kohen Gadol in Judaism gets married, unlike the priest who doesn't get married. And there's other things too. So it's a little bit cheesy to translate Kohen as priest, but like a priest in the Catholic religion, who is kind of an intermediary between the members of his parish and God. So the Kohen is that intermediary who offers the sacrifice, communicates with the Urim and Tumim. Okay. So David goes to Evyatar the Kohen and says, please bring the ephod. I've got to ask questions because we've just had a massacre here practically. Nobody's been killed, but the city's been burned down and everybody's been taken hostage. Number 1, shall I pursue the raiders? Number 2, will I overtake them if the answer is yes to number 1? And the Kohen responds, not of his own accord, but asking the Urim and Tumim. So to remind you once again, here's what the Kohen looks like. The Kohen has 8 special garments like the turban, and actually he has a head plate. It's hard to see it, but he has a gold head plate that says Kadosh Lashem, holy to God. He's got the turban. He's got the outer vest and the me'il, the garment, the coat, and he has special. The garment has little bells on the bottom, little bells, and there's the breastplate, the choshen, and it's got the 12 jewels for the 12 tribes of Israel. And there's the Urim and Tumim, as I've taught you many times, the parchment that gets inserted into that. There's an insert pocket that it gets inserted into in this breastplate. And then when the Kohen asks a question of God, God responds by these lighting up. the names of each tribe, like, I don't know, Yisachar or Zavulun or Shimon, each tribe's got a jewel, and its name is inscribed on the tribe. And all the letters except for like 2 letters in the Hebrew alphabet are there. And there's a whole thing of how those other 2 letters can come. And God then lights up the letters. And the Kohen is able to figure out the anagram. The questions are supposed to be yes or no questions. Sometimes God says a bit more. And so the question is asked to the Kohen. Number 1, shall I pursue the raiders? And will I overtake them? The Kohen asks God and gets his answer. Pursue. That's yes. For you shall overtake. And you shall rescue them. So Hebrew. Erdof. Shall I pursue achrei hagadud hazeh? Ha'asigenu. Will I catch them? And the answer, ridof, from the same root as eridof. Eridof, ridof, that's Hebrew. The little aleph turns a verb into first person singular plural, future. Shall I pursue? Ridof, pursue. Ki haseg tasig v'hatzel tatzil, because you'll catch them and you'll save them. So David and the 600 men set out. They came to the wadi, which is like a valley, and they continued the pursuit with 400 men, but he's got 600. He left 200 men behind. 200 men halted, too faint to cross the wadi. So as I taught you, but it was 2 weeks ago, and it's not the biggest thing to focus on. So I am taking the time out to refresh our memories of details that we're going to be learning in even greater detail with commentary and Talmud and Midrash. He's got 600 men. 200 of the 600, as they're pursuing, at some point they're out of breath. They're just out of breath. And they can't keep going. And other people are able to keep running and running with their weapons. So the 200 men say, we just can't keep up. And we're no good to you. Now, in an army, most of us, thank God, have been in a generation we haven't had to serve in an army. Some of us have served in an army. But even if you haven't served, if you've studied about military practice, part of an army is having supply lines. Not everybody goes into Gaza for Israel. They have to have supply lines that are able to send food and new food, right? Every day they eat food. What, they bring food with them? How much? They've been in there for 3 months. You think think each guy's got to carry 3 months of food? He's got, what, a bottle of Tang? So they've got some food. He doesn't have a bottle of Tang, yes, but they have a little kit. But new food comes in, and other stuff gets shipped back, gets sent back, and there's supply lines. And that's also a way to serve. Not everybody can serve on the front lines. Not everybody's capable, but everybody is capable of helping in some way. There are people not even able to go down to be part of the supply lines. So they're helping out on the farms. While all the people on the farms have to leave their farms in this highly agricultural society with commerce and an industry, an economy that relies to some great degree on agriculture, Israeli fruits and vegetables and dairy products and cows and grass. And these people are out now in the army and they're fighting. So who's watching the farms? And Israel's had a substantial economic hit by less production, but other people who normally would not be on the farms are volunteering to go on the farms and milk the cows, so that the guys who milk the cows can be on the front lines with Hamas. And that's how it works. So here also, David leaves 200 men behind. Look, you can't keep up, so you be part of the supply lines. And also, we got a lot of stuff. We brought a lot of stuff with us, and we have to leave some of it right now here. Maybe we'll come back for it. We're running with our spears and our shields, but we have a lot of other stuff, maybe our helmets. We got a lot of other stuff we may need. We may need to come back for it. And we can't just leave it here. Because if we leave it here, someone else will come and take it. Right now, I'm in the process of watching the Seven Samurai. Okay, don't ask why. It's a long story. It's almost as long as that very long movie. And while I'm watching it, one of the things, there was just a scene about how these farmers who are not samurai go and they find a location where other samurai had been killed and their body armor was still there. So the farmers took all the body armor of the dead samurai and they brought it to these other samurai. And that's what it is. If David leaves his body armor and some of the other stuff, someone else, one of these other nations will come. So these 200 men can provide a very important sword. You can't run anymore. You can't keep up. Sit here with your spears and your own shields and guard our supplies. Okay, fine. This is important. Why am I taking out that? You'll see why I'm taking out time. This is very important. You'd say this is not so important. 200 guys are sitting around watching the stuff. This is very important. We'll continue. So they go forward. They came upon an Egyptian in the open country, Ish Mitzri. What's he doing there? What is an Egyptian doing in the middle of this? Here's this, and the Egyptian is off the map. The Egyptian is southwest of the Arabu tribes. He's coming from, what's he doing here? He's in the wrong book. You belong in the book of Exodus. You belong with Pharaoh and this. What are you doing in our story? So find this Egyptian, and they brought him to David, gave him food to eat, water to drink, treated him nicely. He was given a piece of fig cake I mentioned last time. If you've ever seen like figs all pressed together and raisins, because it's dry. They're in the desert, and you're trying to bring food that can survive in the desert. You're not coming with refrigerators. They didn't even have refrigerators. In those days, there were no refrigerators or freezers. Today, an army could bring portable refrigeration. So what do you bring? You bring figs. You bring raisins. I mentioned this last time. You bring dried fruits. But you don't bring prunes for obvious reasons, because if you bring prunes, that's the end of the war. Everybody sits at the supply line. So they've got dates, they've got raisins, and he ate. And if you'll say to yourself, well, that's not what dates and raisins and figs, and that makes them strong. I mean, you need meat. No, if you're in an environment, if you're on a diet where your diet is starving, that's your diet. You're starving in the middle of the desert. Dates, figs, and raisins can make you feel real good and strong. Okay, we continue. David asked him, and by the way, I'm going in English, not Hebrew, because I want to cover a bunch of text, and you know that we often do the Hebrew, and where I think there's a word I really want to point out to you, as I did before with Erdof and Radof and stuff, I'll do it. And David asked him, to whom do you belong? Where are you from? I'm an Egyptian boy. Okay, I'm a slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me. So same thing, I fell ill. The Amalekites have just raided the Jewish camp, burnt the city, taken all the hostages. And they bring their servants with them to carry their body armor, to carry their food. That's what they're servants for. This particular servant got ill. He couldn't keep up. So it's not like the Jewish guys with David who can't keep up, where they still can serve a valuable purpose and they're part of our army. Here, he's just some lowly Egyptian slave. I'm an Amalekite. This is some lowly Egyptian slave. To heck with him. So the Amalekite basically abandons him in the desert to starve to death. He's got no food. He's got no water. Can't keep up with me? You served your use, starve to death. To heck with you. So that doesn't breed a lot of loyalty. And that's going to be good for us. That's good for the good guys. He's explaining we, anachnu. So he's speaking as though he's part of the Amalekite team. But his loyalties are no longer quite there. But that's his team. We had raided the Negev of the Kreti, of the Keret, and then the Negev of Yehuda. So we've been raiding in the Negev. I showed you that southern Judea, southern Yehuda. So we've been raiding over there, and the Negev of Kalev, and we also burned down Tziklag. While we were down there, we figured we'd stop by Tziklag and we'd burn it down. So we were here making all kinds of trouble, and we burned down Tziklag and we took the women and children. Always good to have women. And the children will be there to support us when we get old. Who knows? Always good in those days to have women and children. It's a different mindset. It's interesting. Today, it's like, I'm a rabbi, and I try to encourage people to have children. I mean, young marrieds, and it's like everybody's looking, we'll have one child, maximum two. They're so expensive. That's not the mindset in the old days. The mindset in the old days, and the Jewish mindset was, you have children. Children are a blessing. Today, children are, how am I going to put them through college? How am I going to be able to pay $50,000, $70,000 a year so they can get spit at Harvard, which is still worth it because you're not there for the education, you're there for the degree. But it's so expensive, and yeshiva is so expensive, and they cost so much. I mean, that's how people look at kids today. It's the Western view of kids. Do you know that outside of Israel, there's not a single country in the OECD that has a positive birth rate? The United States is a birth rate now of 1.6, right? There's a husband and wife, that's 2, and you have to allow for some death of children, like God forbid, that a child here and there dies. So they say you need an average of 2.2 for a society to replace itself in the next generation. You need 2.2. That allows for, God forbid, deaths and stuff. We're at 1.6. We can't, we're not reproducing. If it weren't for all the illegal immigration and legal immigration, we would be fewer each year. And France and England, that's why they're all bringing in Muslims. They're bringing them in because there's nobody to pay into the Social Security system. I'm serious. The Social Security systems all have run out of money. And when you get to be 65, 70, you don't really pay into it much, unless you're fortunate to have a good income even after retirement. So you're drawing from the Social Security, you're not paying into it. So where's the money going to come from? Well, the younger people will pay it. Well, there's not enough young people that haven't reproduced. That France has America's 1.6, France is 1.4. England, they're all averaging 1.6. So that's why they're bringing in all these Muslims, so that they have young people working and paying into the system. One day they're going to wake up and they're going to find out there's money in the system, but it's not going to be for them anymore. Meanwhile, Israel has a reproduction rate of 3.1. Wow. All they need is 2.2. Israel is the only country in the OECD that is naturally reproducing itself, multiplying, plus the immigration coming, thanks to those targets on our backs, the immigration from Russia, from the Ukraine, from France, wherever anti-Semitism rears its ugly head, which is the only thing that seems to ever rear. You ever hear anti-Semitism has reared its ugly head? What else gets reared? I guess a car rears its ugly head, and it brings all this immigration into Israel. So Israel's got this tremendous net immigration. Okay, we continue. So boys and children are a good thing to have in the old days, because there was no Social Security and there was no unemployment and retirement. And God forbid, when you reach 60, 65 and you couldn't work the fields anymore, you needed to have kids working the fields to support you. They were your blessing, and your children and your grandchildren, that was your blessing. And even before you retired, they allowed you to have a bigger farm and more produce and more everything. That was a blessing. Okay, we continue. David said to him, to the Egyptian, can you lead me down to that band of raiders? He said, swear to me by God, you'll not kill me or deliver me to my master's hand. I mean, how do I know you won't kill me? I'm an Egyptian, and I'm talking about the Amalekites like I'm one of them. Certainly I've been helping them. And even if you won't kill me for that, that's not enough. You got to swear you're not going to hand me over to my master because he's going to figure out I brought you to. That's going to be like these Arabs in the Gaza who are underground spies for Israel. They ever get caught, they get torn limb from limb. I'll lead you down. So he led him down. And there they were, the Amalekites, scattered all over the ground, eating and drinking, having a good time, making merry, because all the vast spoil they'd taken from the land of the Philistines, that's Gaza land, Philistines, Gaza, and that includes Tziklag and land of Yehuda. So what were they doing? They were ochlim v'shotim, ochel, to eat, shoteh is to drink, chogeg, from the word chag. They were celebrating. Shalal is the bounty. Gadol is big. They were eating and drinking and celebrating their great big bounty that they took from the Plishtim, the Philistines, in the land of Yehuda, Judea. And they weren't ready for it. So David attacked them at night. He attacked them mehaneshef yara erev. He attacked them from, now it doesn't say erev to erev. If neshef means night and erev means night, why does it say the same word? There's a big discussion in the Talmud. What does neshef mean? Because the Gemara and this text precedes the English language. So when this was written, this was not yet written. So they're trying to figure out in the Gemara, what is neshef? It says they fought from, David slew them and smote them from neshef until erev. We know what erev means. Erev means evening. So one opinion is neshef maybe could have been night. They fought from night until the following evening, 24 hours. Or maybe neshef means daybreak, dawn. That's the one this guy chose. It's not the only choice, by the way. The meaning is uncertain, but they hide that. They tuck that into a little note. And then they tell you dawn like they know what they're saying. It might mean that the battle was from dawn till night, a 12-hour battle, or from night till the following evening, a 24-hour battle. And then to make it a little bit more complicated, l'macharatam. L'macharatam until the evening of the next day. So it sounds like, what was it? A 12-hour battle? A 24-hour battle? A 2-day battle? File that in your mind. A question. But it was a battle. Now, if it was a 2-day battle, it was a much longer, tougher battle. Or it was an easy battle, or it was a battle. But when it was all done, Velodim lat mehemish, not a single Amalekite survived. Ki im arba meot ishnar, with the exception, thousands of Amalekites are killed, with the exception of 400 young men who got away fleeing on camel. 400 who fled on camel. And as I mentioned last class, also remind you, nowadays we associate camels with just a boring, dull animal that doesn't really seem to move much, walks incredibly slowly, clippity-cloppity, one hump or two humps, depending on whether it's a Bactrian or I was going to show off that I know the names of both of them, and then it just went blank. There's the Bactrian, and then there's the other kind, and I'll pick it up. Anyway, and so it's either got one hump or two humps, and in the old, actually camels run. And until the rich sheikdom started importing thoroughbreds from Kentucky and the South, so they could have Kentucky Derby quality racing in Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, they used to have camel races. So 400 got away on camels. And we're going to talk about that. What's the deal with why didn't they slay all the Amalekites? Did David allow 400 to get away on camel? Did they get away on their own? Was the battle a half a day, 2 days? All right. But the bottom line, he rescued everybody. Everyone, the Amalekite, he rescued everybody. No negotiations to get the hostages back. He went to war. He didn't give up anything to get the hostages back. He fought. Well, you might think, but if you go to war to get the hostages back, they'll kill the hostages. Very often what happens in these situations is they kill the hostages. And very, very often in these situations, they don't kill the hostages. Till the very end, they hide, they're standing behind a hostage and they've got a knife at the hostage's throat. And they're standing behind hostages and they keep them alive because that becomes their human shield. So it's not always a given. But nothing of the Amalekites was left. David killed them all off. He killed off everything, recovered everything that the Amalekites took. The kids, the boys, the spoil, all of their property, and then he took the Amalekites' flocks of sheep and their cows. Everything became their spoil. Now, David reached, this is important. This is why I spent time on it earlier tonight. So now they're going back from battle. And they're happy and they're singing and they're dancing and we just wiped out the Amalekites. We just had the great victory. We've got all our wives back, all our children back, all our property back, all of their property. We've killed off their wives and children. You don't bring back Amalekites. And we brought everybody back. We brought all the sheep. We're just happy. And now they come to the 200 men at the supply chain who had been too faint to follow. Okay. And the 200 men come out. Mazel tov, brothers, we're glad to see you. You're back alive. It looks like you did well. We see women, we see children. David came with all the troops and greeted them. Vayash'alahem l'shalom. Shalom, shalom. And now the question becomes, do those 200 men get any of the spoils? It's a thing about people in general, isn't it? You probably all experienced this. Haven't you experienced people with friendships that come to an end over money? Families, brothers and sisters that come to an end over money? It's like an unbelievable thing. There's an expression that, this little midrashic expression with, you take a piece of glass and you look through the glass and you see everybody, but you line the glass with silver and you only see yourself. Silver makes people turn from seeing everybody to seeing themselves. And a fight breaks out, not physical, but a political fight breaks out right now. Do we or don't we share our spoils with the 200 men who were there waiting for us, watching over the property? So we continue. Let's just take that off the screen if it's on yours. Okay. So the mean and churlish men, well, those are good. You don't really hear churlish often. Kol Ishra Uvlial, the nasty ones from among the 400, who had accompanied David in battle, said, since the other 200, did not accompany us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we seized, except each can take his wife and kids. Yan asher lo holchu imi, since they didn't come with me, lo nitan lahem meha shalal, we won't give them from the shalal, from the bounty. Ki im ish et ishto v'yet, he could have his wife and kids. David said, no, you must not do that. My brothers, echai, achim, brother, lo ta'asuchen achai. That's not the way we brothers act. We band of brothers. In view of what the Lord has granted us, guarding us and delivering into our hands the bandit attack, asher natana shemlanu ve'yishmorotanu, God guarded over us, and he gave us biyadenu in our hands. How could anyone agree with you in this matter? No, the share of those who remain with the baggage shall be the share the same as the share of those who went down to battle. Everyone. And from that day on, by David's decree, and he's not a king yet, he's simply the leader of his band of 600 men and their families. From that day on, it was made a fixed rule for Israel. By Himayayoma by Simala Chokul Mishpat Israel. It becomes a chok. It becomes a law in Judaism, continuing to the present day. Arayomasa. Those who are on the supply lines share in the spoils with those who go into the front lines. By David's decree. And David comes back to Tziklag, and he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Yehuda and to his friends, saying, "This is a present for you from our spoil from the enemies of the Lord." And to those in Hebron and all the places, he sent all over. And that's the end of the text of chapter 30. For the rest of tonight's class and next week's class, we're going to learn Midrash. And then we'll do chapter 31 with 1 week more into it. Let's start now, and let's take about 5 to 10 minutes max. And we'll stop at 8:10, because it took me a few minutes to start rolling. 8:05 to 8:10. I don't want to take on a new thing at 8:05. Let's see. Here we go. First of all, I want to teach you about Amalek. What's the deal on Amalek? As you know, let's just do this. Okay. As you know, Abraham and Sarah are the patriarchs, Abraham and Sarah. They have the children, Yitzchak and Yishmael, Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael doesn't come out right, though according to the Midrash, he became righteous at the end of his life. Yitzchak, Isaac, is the second of our patriarchs, and he marries Rivka, Rebecca, and they have 2 children, Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esau. And Yaakov is the third of our patriarchs. These are the 3 holy. And Esau goes on his way, and he becomes a wild man. The Torah, because Esau was the son of Jacob, Yaakov, our patriarch, simply by virtue of that, even though he was not holy, he merited a chapter of the Bible for his dynasty, for his descendants to be listed by name. I've mentioned in the past, maybe it was in this class in a different context, about shelf space. In the supermarkets, they fight for shelf space. Coca-Cola fights Pepsi, and they both combine to keep out the smaller sodas so they could have as many of their product on the aisle and as few of the other product on the aisle. And the little products struggle to get their product on the aisle, and they're fighting for shelf space. I like to get whole wheat pita with my hummus because I was told it's healthier than the white bread pita. And Sara Lee makes an OU certified. The problem is Sara Lee does not do as hard a job to get their pita shelf space as they do to get their diabetes cakes shelf space. So to get whole wheat pita, it's a matter of luck, depends on the week. The Torah is the most precious shelf space of all. Say precious shelf space 3 times fast. It's the most precious shelf space of all. And for Esav to have the family listed is a big thing. This is why this is important to us right now. Here we go. So let's take this up right now. First, okay, of course, let's do that. So Torah tells us chapter 36 is dedicated to the children of Esav. Ela Toldot Esav, chapter 36, his shelf space, aisle 36. This is the line of Esav, who's also known as Edom. And it talks about he married this one and that one. And then he had children. And who are his sons? Let's see. It lists the sons of Esav, and these are the names of Esav's sons. Eliphaz, the son of Esav's wife Ada, Eliphaz ben Ada. And then there is, let's see, he's got, there's Reuel, son of Basma. So we have Elishmot ben Esav, Eliphaz ben Ada, Eshet Esav. There's Eliphaz, the son of Ada, Esav's wife. And that word wife here is important. Wife, W-I-F-E, Eshet. And Reuel ben Basmat Eshet Esav. And the second sons, he had two boys. And they are sons of his wives. Verse 11. By Bnei Eliphaz, now Esav's grandchildren, Eliphaz's sons, Esav's grandchildren, were Taman, Omar, Sapho, Gatam, and Kanaz. He had 5 sons. Those were born to his wife, or wives. Wife. And then there was Timnah, Pilegesh Eliphaz. Timnah was a concubine of Esau's son Eliphaz. What is a Pilegesh, a concubine? A concubine is a woman who lives with a man like she's his wife, only she has no marriage document. They live like nowadays, they live out of marriage, they live out of wedlock. So when you're married, you're protected. When you're married, you have a marriage license, you have a ketubah. It entitles you to alimony and child support. Well, leave out child support. It entitles you to alimony. If you are married and you don't have anything, go ahead and get alimony. You could ask for palimony. It's like a whole big thing. Go ahead and get alimony if you don't have protection. It's a lot more complicated, isn't it? So in Judaism, a woman that gets married has a ketubah, and she has a guarantee of alimony. That's actually what a ketubah is. People hang and frame ketubahs in their living room wall. It's basically the husband promising to pay alimony. If people only knew what it said. I mean, it's like when you make a prenup, a secular prenup with a lawyer, who goes and hires an artist to make the prenup beautiful for $3,000 and then hangs the prenup on their living room? So everybody should come and they see he's got a Monet and he's got a Van Gogh, and that's, who's that? That's the law firm of Jones, Johnson, and Smith. That's the prenup. Who does that? Jews do that with the ketubah. They don't know what they're hanging. They don't know what they're hanging. They don't know what they're hanging. It's an Aramaic. It could actually say the owner of this house is a moron, and they would hang it if it was artistic. Nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's walking around in a daze. You don't understand. The hardest part is when you become a rabbi, you actually get to see how the sausage is made, and it's terrifying. So anyway, here's what's going on. She was a concubine. That means she had no protection. So why would she do that? So I'm going to save the time because it's late. I have a midrash to read you, but I won't because I want to get done on time. Or she was actually a very important person. Verse 22. Lotan was a great man. Lotan was a leader. These are the sons of Seir. Lotan, he was a general, he was a leader. He had children, and he had a sister. Lotan's sister was Timnah. Achot Lotan Timnah. She would rather have been a concubine to Eliphaz than to marry someone of substance, because to her, the Midrash tells us, it was more important somehow, some way, however distantly, to connect to the glorious house of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And since they would not marry him to her, Yaakov would not marry her. He was married to Leah and to Rachel. And so she couldn't marry into that house. She married Eliphaz. And he didn't want to marry a wife, but you want to sleep with me and have a kid for me and do the dishes and vacuum, and so I don't have to pay for a caretaker or a housemaid? Okay, sure. And she was willing to do that for a lifetime, just to be attached, not to Eliphaz, but to Esav, which meant she was attached a bit to Yaakov and the house of Abraham. And if you'll say that sounds kind of strange, have you ever met somebody, because I have, maybe I meet them more because I'm a rabbi, so maybe people tell me that more, but I've had situations where people come to me and say, you know, Rabbi, I'm five, a person who can't read Hebrew and is a good person, nice person, comes to our Hanukkah party. And at the Hanukkah party, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Scott, and Scott Timothy. And I'd like to introduce myself. And, you know, Rabbi, I don't really know a lot, but I'm 4 generations removed from a rabbi who was called the Chafetz Chaim, or the rabbi was called, I understand I'm 9 generations from the Rambam, whoever he was. And it's like people like to say that, like that's a thing. So that's a connection. I don't know much, but I know I come from that. So she wanted that, and she got it. So why am I telling you all this? Why are we learning about Esav? And let's just get that off the screen again. Why am I telling you about Esav and about Eliphaz and about her? Because she gave birth to Amalek. Amalek, Timnah was a concubine of Esav. So let's see, Esav, his son is Eliphaz. That means Amalek is his grandson. Amalek is the grandson of Esav. So Amalek was part of the Jewish people through the concubine. And because Eliphaz did not marry properly, that's what brought Amalek into the world. And he's the progenitor of this hated nation. And he has no place in the Jewish people. Yeah, but isn't he a descendant of our people? By coming through a concubine, he doesn't get a portion. We have that as a tradition from our father Abraham. From Avraham Avinu, at the end of Abraham's life, Abraham not only was the father of Yitzchak and Yishmael, but it says in chapter 25, Avram took another wife whose name was Keturah. Some people say that was Hagar, who came back after Sarah died, whatever. And Avraham had more children. The famous ones are Yitzchak and Yishmael, but he also had, through Keturah, Zimran, Yokshan, Medan, Midyan, Yishbak, Shuach. And then Yokshan had children, etc., and so on and so forth. And all together, he had a nice-sized family. And then the Torah tells us he established as a foundational principle in Judaism, Vayitain Avraham et kol asher lo liYitzchak. Abraham gave in his will all that he owned to Yitzchak, including the land of Israel. You'll notice, like, Arabs rarely come and say, hey, wait a second, you Jews claim the land of Israel through Abraham? We also descend from Abraham, so we also claim the land. You don't really hear that as an argument. They say we're colonizers, but they don't say we also have a claim, because the source of Abraham having a claim, namely the book of Genesis of the Bible, tells us also that Abraham gave it all to Isaac and nothing to Ishmael, just gifts. But to Abraham's sons by concubines, and remember, Ishmael was through Hagar, a concubine essentially. Abraham gave gifts while he was living, and then he sent them away from Isaac. Here's some gifts. Good luck to you, matanas, matana. Vayishalchem. And based on that tradition, we do not leave as a matter of requirement. If you want to give gifts, you give gifts. You can do whatever you like. But as a halachic requirement, we do not leave to the children of concubines. Nowadays, we're not supposed to be having concubines anyway. I guess unless the young Israel of Salt Lake City, I don't know what goes on in Utah. But other than that, I mean, we're not supposed to be having concubines. But that's the reason that Amalek inherits nothing, he's sent away separate from everyone else, and we end up with an eternal war with Amalek. Next week's class, God willing, I've prepared the remainder of a lot of Midrashim, and let me just give you a sneak preview. We're going to talk more about this idea that the 200 who did not go in battle got also from the bounty that the 400 who went into battle got. We're going to find a lot of source material on that. We're also going to talk a little bit more about what was going on here with the taking of the hostages and what went on basically in David wanting to pursue. He asked the Kohen through the Urim and Tumim, may I pursue? Should I pursue? Will I succeed? And God, we saw, said, pursue. We're going to learn more. We learned this about 3 or 4 months ago, but many of you were not part of the class, and others presumably might have forgotten part of it. We're going to go into it even in greater detail. The process of asking the Kohen Gadol, asking questions of God. How do you ask questions of God? How do you interpret the answers, and what the rules are on that? And then I've got a third set of interesting midrash as well that I'd like to share with you. So God willing, that'll be next week. And then the week after, we'll do the final chapter of Book of Samuel 1, 1 Samuel. And it'll be the Philistine battle in which Saul dies with his sons. It's very moving. So thanks for being here. And now I'm going to get back to work on uploading the old former Navi classes, so you'll be able to find the